Santa started fire.
Have you ever been in a situation where someone is giving some advice and it would have been super helpful to hear it, but you just kind of didn't want to hear it? It's kind of like there's two types of people with an IKEA flat pack. The ones that listen and follow the instructions, or the ones that are like, no, I've got it, but end up going to the instructions anyway because they have a missing screw and you're like, I don't know what to do. You know, there's a man in the Bible called Naaman who did the exact same thing. He had some advice given to him and he didn't want to hear about it. And you can find it in 2 Kings 5 verses 1 to 14. You know, Naaman, he was the commander of the army for Aram, which is also known as Syria. And the Bible says he was a valiant man. He was highly regarded because he won great victories in battle. And he would have been really high up in his society. He would have had a lot of access to wealth and to power and to privilege, kind of in like today's society. He would have been on the front cover of GQ magazine, had thousands of Instagram followers. He would have had the house you want to be stuck in during lockdown. Like, it would have been on MTV Cribs. It would have been sick. And his job was to lead the army of Syria on raids against the northern kingdom of Israel on the border. And during these raids, they would take captives and they would become servants in households. And Naaman took a girl and she became a servant to Naaman's wife. And whilst she was a servant, she learned, even though Naaman was this incredible man who looked really good on the outside, he actually had leprosy. You know, leprosy is found throughout the whole Bible. It's a skin disease. It starts quite small and it ends up going over your body with wounds. It's pretty gross and it was a death sentence. There wasn't a cure for it. You couldn't get some essential oils and rub it on and be fine. That was kind of it. And there was nothing to do about it. So this slave girl said, if he goes to my homeland, there's a prophet there and he'll have a cure, like he could be healed. Naaman hears this and he's like, great, jumps on the opportunity with permission from his king. He takes some riches, some fine clothes to pay for his miracle, and he ends up in front of the prophet Elisha's house. And it says in verse 9, so Naaman went with horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a message to say to him, go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored and cleansed. But Naaman went away angry and said, I thought he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot and cure me of leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed? So he turned away and went off in rage. You know, that's kind of crazy when we read this. Naaman had an illness that was going to result in his death. And he had been given the cure, yet he was willing to walk away. He didn't want to hear it because he was snubbed. He was snubbed by Elisha. Like, he rocked up and was like, I know how I'm going to be treated. This is what I deserve. I'm a man of privilege. And Elisha was like, he didn't even come out. He sent a messenger to go speak to him. And because of that, Naaman was really willing to walk away from it. And we can look at that and be like, Naaman, you are a fool. Why would you do that? You are willing to live with pain and illness instead of be healed. Why? But if we're real, we actually all do that to some degree or another. You know, we are willing to live with a form of pain in our lives than actually just be humble and do something about it. I know for me, there was certain times in my life where I would rather live with the pain and distance of a loved one than actually humble myself and work towards reconciliation. And if we're honest, we can all do that at times. You know, and Naaman, his pride was so big that he didn't even like the type of cure he was given. He had an issue with the river. You know, the rivers of Damascus were known for how clean and how pure they were, where you contrast that with the river Jordan, and it has been described to be a deep, sluggish, discolored stream. And he's like, why would I do that? So he's willing to walk away. Thankfully, Naaman's servant spoke some sense into him and was like, if you were told to make a great sacrifice, you would have done it. What's the difference with just going down to the water to be cleansed? The miracle is in the water, because if every leper in town could just go wash themselves in the Jordan, there would be cure. That's not where the cure is. What have you got to lose? So in verse 14, it says, he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him, and his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. You know, in the middle of these gross, messy waters, God performed a miracle. So we can have hope that in the middle of our mess, God is there and he can perform a miracle. You know, the mess in your life might be snot-filled tears you cry at night, or a messy family situation, or just life itself can get messy. But we can hold on to the hope that even though it's messy, it doesn't mean that God's not there and working. We can have hope that God is there and he can bring a miracle in the middle of our mess. But Naaman's story is so much more than just about a physical healing. You know, God used the physical healing to highlight and show what the real problem was. The real drastic, life-changing, eternity-altering issue that was going on was Naaman's relationship with God. Yes, he was healed physically of leprosy, but in the Bible, leprosy is found throughout the Bible, and it was actually a physical, symbolic meaning for sin and how it defiles us. And leprosy would have actually removed people from community, just like sin removes us from God. But there is a cure to our sin, and his name is Jesus. You know, Jesus came down and lived a perfect, holy life on earth and took the penalty of our sin, which was death, even though he was innocent, so that we can be freely forgiven and that we don't have to pay for the consequence of it. And, you know, God will meet you in the middle of your mess. Even if you're thinking, but I'm too messed up, I can't get that salvation. Naaman and Elisha were the foretelling of Jesus, who was going to come and save humanity from their sin. Naaman wasn't a Jew. He wasn't a part of God's chosen people. In fact, his land worshipped different gods and it was full of mess. But God didn't exclude him. You know, the real miracle is salvation, and nobody is too far gone for God or too messy that God won't save them. You know, I've been there where I've looked inwardly and I've seen just ugly, sluggish mess in my life. And in that moment, I've been like, God wouldn't reach me here. I'm too far gone. But you know what? It happened to me, and I know it can happen to you, that God will meet you in the middle of that mess. And he won't just sit there and chill, but he will cleanse you and he will heal you from the sin that's been holding you captive, because he is a life-giving, redeeming, and restoring God who wants nothing more than just to be in relationship with us, because he has this deep, unending love for us that no mess we get ourselves into can stop. And so my question for all of us is, will we take the same steps as Naaman did and set aside our pride and our expectations and humble ourselves before God and be obedient to his word?